thought it'd be interesting to kind of have some of these thoughts live. I mean, when I make my videos, they are just like this. I sit down and I talk, one take. I go in with the subject, but I thought it'd be interesting to once in a while do some of these live. And I've always done this channel pretty late at night. I mean, it's almost 1 in the morning for me right now. And I've always done these. I started this channel actually with there was an intention. It wasn't out of nowhere. I decided to start this channel. I started this channel during, this period where for the past 3 months before the day I started, or a day before I started this channel, I had this kind of really interesting, nice, it felt like for the first time in my life, I was really connecting with someone, if I'm being honest. It was, quite the experience. And I've always explained to people this experience almost as if, I was someone who, if you're colorblind, you only know, you can't see the color red. You can't describe it. You can't explain the color red. You can't, it's theoretical. And I almost explained this whole situation, everything, as if for the first time in my life I was able to see the color red. And it was really incredible, in a sense, to be able to have a relationship, like have this almost relationship with someone. And it turned out it was not, it really went south. And that's part of what spawned me starting the channel, right? And I've always done these videos relatively late at night. If you look at my video history, actually, you'll find that basically every single video I do is at night. And occasionally I'll do them in the middle of the day, such as I did one today that was earlier, because it was on my mind and I wanted to get it out. But I've always been someone who is, I sometimes get these comments on the channel saying, you're all doom and gloom, you're all this, you're all that. And it's honestly not accurate. It's not true, right? I would say the majority of my mental, of how I think about things, about everything like that is actually relatively positive. I would say that I'm a overall relatively happy person. But I've always found that after 10 a.m., after 11 a.m., it always like it's those thoughts that I think maybe because I'm so maybe involved and active during the day, I, it's almost like they're not repressed, but they're not pushed to the forefront of my mind. And they almost sit there and aren't like actively damaging. But it's always later at night like this where when things start to calm down, when almost like the storm of your mind starts to subside a little bit, that's always the time I've found. And that it's like my thoughts percolate more. And the thing too is like I've always found that my logical defense system, if that makes sense, the way my brain like can counter some of these points, such as I'll be alone forever, I'll never find a partner, no one's gonna want me, all these things. It's like my logical defense systems go down and I'm just left with my emotions. I'm just left with my brain. And it used to be that I would just kind of not spiral that bad, but in a sense, spiral. So I want to have a moment of appreciation for everyone who is watching my videos and subscribing and doing all that, because, I was going to do this channel regardless of viewers, and it's nice to get some viewers, and because it's really therapeutic for me. I don't know if you've if you watched a few of my videos, you might have noticed that I go in and about towards the end of the video, I might leave it with a significantly more positive conclusion than I had going into it. Sometimes these videos are very therapeutic, and I think they are in a sense. It's also quite nice to see that in a lot of these situations, from feeling as if there's a wall between, you know, my ability, like dating and everything, there's like a wall. And most people I talk to, uh, it's almost as if like everyone I know lives a different experience than me. And it's nice to read the comments and see that there's, people I've seen comments saying, I've never seen my perspective being articulated so well. I really feel seen. And it's not a joy for me to see that other people are going through some of the same things as me. It's the human experience, of course. But it is, at least for me, you know, uh, it's helpful to know that it's not just me. It might be the few of us against the world, right? But at least it's not myself against the world, and I think that's a big thing. And I've also seen a lot of LARPing accusations, right? Which are very funny to me because they're compliments in a way. They're like, "There's no way you can't be doing well." I'm like, "Thank you. I appreciate the compliments." Um, but it's also something where that's part of the lived frustration here. And I will be, if you ask me questions, because this is live, I will respond to a few. I just don't want to break the stream of consciousness too much. Um, but I part of the frustration is part of the frustration is that sometimes on paper it's like things should be going better, right? And things should be going well. And it's almost as if there's like this brick wall between almost these like intuitions that people have, these like these things that people like that you just know. It's like, oh, like if you have like you will just know what to say, it will just happen. All these things I just feel like it's like there's a leap in logic, right? There's like we're a leap in our shared, it's as if like for people that I speak to and get like advice from, they smart and successful and logical and they want the best for me. It's as if we're starting from a different foundation. I got a math degree in college, and one thing that you learned in the math degree, right, especially I did a lot of proofs, was that we have a system of logic, and you can actually study it formally. It's called you can be a logician, which is the coolest name ever. And one thing when you learn logic, right, you start with these building blocks that are called axioms. And the way that our logic system works is that you, at a certain point, you must just believe something and you can't prove it to be able to prove anything. Almost if you've done anything computer science, recursion, right? If you have a belief, think of why you have that belief. It's because of something. Okay, well, why do you have that belief? It's because of something. Well, why do you have that belief? It's because eventually you go through this chain, and these chains are connected by logic and also previous things that were proven to you. You can call those theorems. You have this chain of logic and theorems until you get to your base set of axioms, which are things you just decide to be true. So sometimes I feel like when you get the advice such as, it'll just work out when you least expect it, in dating. I hear this all the time. And I thought about that very deeply because I spoke about it on a video previously. And I think, and when people tell me, oh, it'll work out when you least expect it, I hear this time and time again from people I love and respect and appreciate who are logical and, you know, deep thinkers. And I know that they're not trying to lead me astray. And I also know that they are thinking about this. They're not just hand waving my problems away. I also know that they actually do want the best for me, that they do actually want to give me advice in the right direction. But part of what I've almost deduced is that if you come from a lived experience of having several relationships before and having lots of opportunity. And because there's people, and I don't know if you guys have this too, a lot of my friends I love deeply, but I see, a lot of them, and it's like they're either in long-term relationships or they can't seem to stay out of one. It's like they'll leave a long-term relationship and they will just be like, I want some time for myself. I check back in 3 months and they are in a new relationship. So if you come from that lived experience, which a lot of people do, the line of the advice, it will work out. It'll just happen when it happens. It'll just work out. Actually makes sense from their experience. And I've thought about this. Whenever you give advice on social, especially social situations and social settings, you tend to look through the lens of your own experience because solving a problem such as maybe figuring out what is the value of this company for an acquisition, well, those are more technical numbers and shared, like it's more like physical. It's like you have logic and you have a lot of things you can build with. Whenever it's social situations, you don't really have that same set of tools to work with. You might use the same logic, but it's something where you really have to lean into your own experience. So maybe when I pose that question to people and they look at it and they think deeply and they want to give a real answer, they're looking through their own lived experiences. And if my kind of question of like, I have this fear it's not going to work out, what should I do? The line of reasoning, it'll work out when you least expect it, is actually valid from their perspective. And that's why when they give me that advice or they give me that, they say that, they do actually genuinely mean it. They are not they're not ignoring it, they're not giving some canned advice because it's true from their perspective. It is true from their lived experience, but then when you take that and you apply it to maybe someone like me who has a very different lived experience and a lot of other people, it really falls short. It really it just doesn't satisfy my set of lived experiences that then come to the problem I have. And I think I've thought about that a lot more recently. And let me respond to a question or two because I want to go and talk, but I also want to, since I'm live, I might as well engage. Uh, Yo, bro, I love you, man. You're actually awesome. Thank you. Also, do you think girls have way too many mood swings and show too many mixed feelings? So I am not a dating advice coach, guys. If you watch my videos, you should know this. I think, I think, at least in my experience, there's a lot of, at least I've been told, and I get this all the time. I'll have people be like, oh, I'll go on a date with someone. They're like, what were the vibes that they put off? Really just summarizing vibes or signals or cues. And I just look at people weirdly. I'm like, I don't know what that means. And I'll give a really good example. A couple years ago, I went, I actually, I was, this was my freshman year. I had a Spanish class, and there's this girl in the Spanish class, and I was like, whoa, she's like really, really, really pretty, right? Really pretty. And like, I wanted to get to know her, and she dropped out of my Spanish class very quickly. And I never caught her name. And for so many years, I never knew her name. And then one day I saw her name appear somewhere. So I sent her a message and I was very direct in my message because I just am more of a direct person. And I was like, hey, like we had class a couple days ago, like a couple years back for a few days. I thought you were like really pretty. Do you want to go on a date? And she said yes, which was huge for me. It was amazing. And I went on that date and I was trying to be very intentional to ask a lot of questions and not talk too much. And by the end of that date, I had a really great experience. And I didn't see anything where she obviously was not responding or anything blatant. And we had a mutual friend, and I went to several days later. I saw her, this mutual friend, at a bar, and this mutual friend came up to me and said, "Hey, I heard the date went terribly." And I was just so confused. Terribly. And she was drunk, so maybe it was an exaggeration. But I think that's one is an anecdotal situation that kind of can help explain my general lived experience of I just can't tell. And if it's not written out clearly, I'm just not going to pick up on it. And specifically to your question of like too many mood swings and mixed feelings, I think it is so one thing I will say is that generally, and this is more kind of like biological reasons, in a male female relationship, I cannot speak on male male, female female. I can't speak on that. But in a male female relationship, the investment, and this is just speaking like biological terms, historical terms, this is not trying to be like weird or anything, but like in theory, if a man and woman, get together and they have children, the woman like takes on significantly more investment than the man does. I mean, just look at it like you're 9 months for pregnancy and then you're raising a child. That's a massive investment. So that kind of biological wiring has pushed forward to almost have women on average be a little bit more defensive and a little bit have to think through it a bit more than the man in the beginning. It's something where you might hear it was love at first sight for men, and you almost never hear that for women. They might say, "Oh, it was love at first sight for me too," but was it really? And that's nothing like it's not even really for cultural reasons. I think it's more deep biological reasons to be safe, and that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think for that reason, you might see more mood swings or mixed signals because it's not even uh, mixed signals in a sense, and not, this is just a generalization, just a theory, I don't know. It's case by case always. But I think it might actually be an accurate reflection of this evaluation process, which has to be a lot more sophisticated in the beginning. Um, but also, yeah, I also just clearly cannot decipher these mixed signals. And another thing too that has just really irked me, and or at least it feels so wrong to me. I just can't understand it. Is this, especially in a lot of dating, right? I get told that there's almost these hard set rules where by date two and at least by date three, you have to make a physical move. And if you don't make some physical move, go for a kiss or something like that, even more, right? That they're just going to perceive you as a friend, that they're going to think that you're not interested. And to me, I just can't understand. Like, it feels so strange and wrong to just go up to someone. Like, okay, you're ending a date with someone, you awkwardly pause, and then you just go in for a kiss. Like, to me, I'm like, I would feel so awful if it wasn't reciprocated. Not only from just embarrassment, but I don't want to put through a situation where you're being. It almost feels like assault in a sense, and I know that's a very broad term for a lot worse things. But then the term is so broad that technically there's not like obvious like formal consent. So I wouldn't even want to take that risk. I wouldn't want to do that. And I almost get this look of disappointment from people when I tell them, yeah, I went on the second date or the third date. They're like, did you make a move? I was like, no. They're like, they must give me this like, you're not doing it right. And I'm just thinking, what do you mean I'm not doing it right? It's something where I don't need everything written out in language formally. And I think part of it too is that since I have such a long past history of, rejection or not really having you know, my feelings reciprocated, that I might be more sensitive to potentially negative signals, if that makes sense. I might be more sensitive towards not rounding up. Like I think some people, especially if you have this past experience of people are always, always like into you or whatever, you have endless whatever, that you might have this confidence that a questionable signal is actually positive. Well, I might have a questionable signal as strictly questionable, and I cannot round it up as positive. And a lot of people, I think it's almost like, oh, it's instinctual. It'll come to you. You'll just know. And I get this again and again where I'll just know. And I don't understand. I'll just know. I'm waiting to just know. And throughout my entire life, especially when I was younger, I would always try to find a friend of a friend to ask. Even in college and even now, I'll be honest. I with everything to me is a mixed signal if it's not clear. Everything at least registers to me as a mixed signal. And I always am looking, I'm like, do they have a mutual friend I know? If I can just get their raw, unfiltered thoughts, maybe filtered, I know it's like you can't pry into their lives, but at least a general sense to give me something concrete, then I can go from there. And I think it's a mix of just not being able to pick up on these signals or not being able to, and also a mix of, in the past, it just not going well. And it kind of, compounds to be this situation where I'm just very much not confident on these kind of mixed signals. And it's definitely left me at a point where, there's been things where people are like, oh, well, I guess he just wants to be friends. And I'm like, the other thing too is I feel like a lot of people have such a strong difference between, friendships and a formal relationship, where for me, I feel that the almost like the layer of being of friendship is like necessary. If you are picking someone or if you're partnering with someone with the possibility of spending the rest of your life together, do you not want to be friends with them as well? Do you not want to have that kind of level of compatibility? Because I don't feel like there's a clear cut, here are things that you do with friends and here are things you do with a partner. There's some things you tend not to have romantic feelings for friends. I mean, gray area in some of those things, and you do for a partner. But it's also something where there's a lot of science behind the honeymoon period, the honeymoon period, right? You can look at stuff by like Andrew Huberman and a lot of technical papers and research that coming out about that kind of firing off of dopamine and serotonin of really making you like the I'm in love, the obsessed period, right? And that wears off 3 to 18 months in for most people. And most relationships, especially if you're going for a life partner, are going to last a little bit longer than 3 to 18 months, ideally, if they're the right fit. So I would also want to have almost a deeper screening in the beginning for compatibility beyond that, right? And it almost seems as if that if you show any signals of not just being blatantly romantic and physical right away, that you've almost boxed yourself out. And the other thing too is I think it's challenging because if you show too many of the friend signals, then you are going to be like the whole friend zone thing is very real, right? And it's this weird mix where it seems like most people they have this kind of expectation that I just can't, I just don't want to match, right? So I don't know, and that's something I'm trying to figure out. And I guess I just don't understand how to approach that, right? And I've also been thinking about something, and I've been thinking about like what's important to me and what I'm kind of like what's valuable, what I like appreciate in a relationship. And this kind of interaction I had a couple months back where for the first time ever, it's like there was a certain level of attention and detail that was, really stark and incredible, right? Where I've thought about this a lot, but I feel like one of the true like expressions of love is attention. And I don't just mean, and there's a very big distinction that I want to make clear. I'm not speaking about obsession attention where you're texting someone every 5 minutes and you are like, why are you texting me back? And you appear in their lives all the time. If anything, for me, like, I need a lot of time by myself, and I've spoken about this before, and maybe I'll speak about this in a second. But for me, it's like I need a lot of time just by myself, and that showing up constantly and always being there probably is not a good fit for me. But it's almost like very detailed, sharp attention. And it was something where an example was in this past thing that, happened, like, you know, this girl like said, hey, here's a book. I want you to give it back to me, but, you know, I think you'd like it. And I, I do read. I have a set of books. I'm very picky with the books I read, though. I feel like most books are a total waste of time, but the right ones are the best experience you can have. A couple recommendations from me. The Lessons of History by Will and Ariel Durant, probably one of the best 100 pages you'll ever read in your life. Uh, I think Civilizations and Its Discontent by Sigmund Freud is really interesting too, especially chapter 2 on happiness. I have a long list, but the point of what I was saying is that the book that she handed me was on this list I had, which I had a very specific list I never shared. And that was an example of attention to detail where it was almost like an understanding of me and thinking of me and then putting that there that was, so important. But I also want to speak a little bit on something I mentioned earlier, which was, I spoke about this in a video before, but almost I've always been someone who, grew up as an only child. I spent most of my time as a kid, by myself, just coming up with things in my head. Like I mean, I had a great childhood, and it'd be something where I had friends, and I would I would see them once in a while, but it'd be like I'd see them for 2 hours, and by the end of 2 hours, I was like, I really enjoyed this time together, but it's time for me to go back. It's time for me to leave. Um, and later and there's almost a story from college I always like to bring up. I went with my friends on spring break, and we went to Florida, and it was great. It was a great group of guys. I still actually am very close with all of them. I'm going to Japan in a couple weeks with a handful of them, because one of them is doing a program in Japan right now. It's really interesting. I'm excited to go. And it was something where they all went to the beach. We all went there. We were planning to hang out there for the whole day, and 30 minutes in, I kind of just put in my AirPods and walked around by myself and got dinner over lunch by myself for like 3 or 4 hours. And by the time the late afternoon rolled around, I met back up with them. And it wasn't as if I was like, I don't like hanging out with them. If anything, I really appreciated being there. But it was something where I almost needed that time apart. And sometimes I feel like it's great when I appreciate my friends now because a lot of them understand that if they have something that they're doing that I might leave early, I might drop out, I might Irish exit. I mean, my name is Connor Flannery. It's pretty Irish. So I definitely indulge in the Irish exit quite a bit. And, sometimes I'll leave early, but it's not a signal that I'm not enjoying the time. If anything, I sometimes I feel like I appreciate the most out of everyone just to be there. And I don't know if anyone has experienced this as well, but I really just fold in group situations. And what I mean by that is I can I can have a really good conversation with someone one on one, and partially it's because I, almost jump over all the small talk in a sense. I have the first couple lines, but I kind of go right into the things that are interesting, what they're doing, what they care about, and I can go really deep one on one with people. But for some reason, whenever it's a group setting, like you're in a group of 5 people, maybe you know a few of them, or especially when you know none of them, I just feel like there's so many different people and situations. I just end up usually saying nothing. And it's something where I appreciate my friends because especially when we're in a group, like I can hang out with them and say nothing. And then in certain times I'll say quite a bit, but for a lot of it I'll just kind of be silent and they know that I'm not upset or not enjoying the time, that I'm actually really enjoying the time. But it's harder when, for example, in college, there are these, fraternities, and actually, there's this fraternity that I became friends with everyone individually, and then I was kind of brought into the group setting, which was very nice. But I really could not, I really couldn't like exist in I couldn't, the rush process was impossible for me because it'd just be a big ambiguous group of people and everyone would be talking and I would just find myself standing there not saying anything because I wouldn't even know what to do. You just go up to someone and say hello and then what do you say after that? And it's definitely harder now that, I'm out of college and that group is a bit more separated and I'm a little bit, I'm not on my own entirely, but I'm like, I don't even, like, you see a group of, like, I don't know how people just go up and say something. I just don't understand how people just can do it so naturally. And it feels like most people, that's the other thing too, it feels like most people just know it, right? They just kind of know how to do that. I mean, a little bit of respect. I'm like, wow, that's a skill I do not have. And that's cool, I guess, right? It's like, if you want to give me any pointers, let me know. And I've spoke about this before, but I have this like I found that it is so easy for me to spend a lot of time by myself. And I've referenced the video that you probably seen you recommended with the title of like I've spent more time in my head than I have in real life because I found that line summarized and quoted so perfectly my lived experience because, I'm someone who, without even trying, I walk 10,000 steps a day. I love going on walks. I put my headphones in, and one thing that's interesting is I prefer to walk in crowded areas. So when I was at college, I loved walking on the campus because there's all these people around. Now I go because like downtown is just right behind me, and I walk downtown, and I like being surrounded by all these people. On these walks, though, I really prefer not to interact with anyone, right? It's like my preference is that, no one talks to me, but I prefer to be in that situation. And I found that I spend a lot of time kind of ruminating and thinking, and only recently have I really sat down and thought about it and realized that when I'm thinking, right, all my thoughts are about, they're all like hypothetical ones, replaying past interactions, um, uh, coming up with theoretical interactions, and they're all like people to people interaction. And it's interesting because it's almost like you get a dopamine release from thinking about talking with people, and it's almost like it's safe, it's safer. It's almost like a cheap form of dopamine. It's almost like, those, the P word. YouTube's always weird with what you say. So like the P word videos on the internet, if you know what I mean, versus a real interaction. The real interaction feels and is like a thousand times better, right? But it is controlled when you watch those videos. So you get this kind of cheap release. And I think it's the same thing with someone like me of spending like these conversations and these interactions that I have hypothetically in my head. It's like I control them. I don't need to think how I have to respond. I don't need to be clocked onto overdrive because I'm in an interaction. Most of the time, it doesn't come supernaturally unless we're talking about one of the subjects I know all this stuff out. It's because it's funny. I live this life where for my company, it's like I take sales calls all day. I'm like talk to clients all day, and I've really thought about how can I struggle with generalist conversation so much, but be really good at that component. And I think I've realized that the answer is because it's a controlled environment where it is 100% on the subject that I love talking about all day. So when I'm thrown into an ambiguous environment, it's different. And I've also thought back in my past about the times where I've been the happiest were the times where I had consistent yet like blips of interaction. So I would spend most of my day by myself, but I'd have periods where I'm like, I'm gonna go hang out with these people. I'm gonna spend time with these people. I'm gonna get dinner with these people. And there's almost controlled, limited interactions where, where it wasn't spending a day 24 hours or something. Like I don't understand how people will sit there for 12 hours just hanging out. I, and I might thoroughly enjoy spending time with all those people. And I just can't understand that component. And I've also thought of the times where, mentally I'm the worst on average, were the times of like almost complete isolation, where I would just spend like there'd be some summers like post college. If you don't know, I have another YouTube channel with over 2 million subscribers that is very different content, and I do other things. So it'd be like a couple of years back, I'd come home from college. I'd be really excited to just be at home all day. I'd make my YouTube videos. I I used to play more video games. Now I haven't like touched Minecraft in like forever. I just don't have time. And it was like in theory I was the most comfortable. It was a very comfortable experience, but it was also the time when I would ruminate the worst and I'd feel the worst on average. So it's something where I've been working on it a lot more recently, where I'm trying to very intentionally be like, okay, it is Friday and the weekend is coming. I need to at least see one person. I need to do at least one social thing and maybe two. And I need to make sure that that happens every single week. And almost like peppering in those those experiences and forcing that to happen is going to elevate my mood drastically and make sure I don't spiral as much. It's interesting. It's almost as if my mental state and my almost ruminations, they get worse and more extreme when I'm more isolated. And even with a little bit but consistent that social interaction, like they're almost capped, right? They don't get as bad. I don't totally understand the correlation. um, I can understand that, people are wired to speak with people and to connect with people. And of course, our wiring, right, is going to be really important for that. So I understand that in theory, of course. I think it's just, it's interesting because the brain is so complicated. There's so many different kind of components that go into it. And it makes sense. It makes sense, but I wish I understood the circuitry behind that and why that was precisely true. And I I like these lives. It's getting late, so I think I'm going to end this live. And I think I'm going to do these once or twice a week, maybe a Friday or Saturday, right? Where I have a lot more time. I just have to get up kind of early tomorrow. So I'm going to wrap things up. I got a video coming out tomorrow. I appreciate everyone spending the time with me and letting me talk through these. And I want to do these once a week. I think it would be fun. I appreciate the time. If you are not subscribed, make sure to do that. And thank you guys so much for the time. And I'll